I'm Alice Lovelace. Welcome to Art Shouts, coming to you live from the ArtsXchange. Today, our guest is Bill Cleveland. I first met Bill in the 80s when I was working with the National Association of Artists-Run Organizations. He was writing a book called Art in Other Places and working in prisons in California. And I just want to show you a little clip of Bill.
Prisoners call clueless newcomers fish. In the summer of 1983, I found myself in the middle of a slow-motion war between the keepers and the kept, swimming hard, struggling for air. At Soledad Prison, our mural paint cart had become a gurney for shanked prisoners, and lockdowns at San Quentin were keeping our artists out of Condemned Row, which was now on a 24-hour suicide watch. Vern McKee was a lifer with a mean guitar who knew everything going on at Vacaville Prison, so he knew we needed help. He pulled us aside and said, "You guys are doing good, but the honeymoon is over. This is a war zone and there are a lot of lives at stake, so you gotta step it up." Then he cut to the chase. "This art thing is some powerful shit. It's like crazy dope, 'cause the more you do, the more you get. But once you get us addicted, man, you got to support the habit. And like I said, for some, it's a matter of life and death. You hear me?" I definitely heard, but I could also feel myself ducking, a silent "yeah, but" rising up, unsaid. A month later, I was at Vacaville running a songwriting workshop. As I was packing my stuff up, a regular named Joe approached me. "You know, Mr. Cleveland," he said, "I almost didn't make it today." I said, "Well, Joe, I'm glad you did." He moved closer. "No, man, I'm saying I almost didn't make it." I realized then that Joe was not just doing the prison okey-doke. I looked him straight on. "Okay, Joe," I said, "what's going on?" He looked down. His voice was heavy, like someone talking through pain. "I've been waking up, thinking about whether I can handle one more day in this hole. This morning it was real bad, you know, but then I got to thinking about those songs, so here I am, again." I was totally thrown. Joe was talking life and death, and I'm fumbling with a jumbled pile of chord books. I muttered something like, "Well, glad to hear." Then he said, "If you don't mind, I got a question." I took a deep breath and nodded. Joe leaned in very close, hands shaking, voice thin. "What happens to us? I mean, when you walk? What the hell is going to happen to me when this class ends?" Joe's pleading stare echoed Vern's hot, hard questions. "You hear me?" Life and death. A blast of pure oxygen from the guys who had the most to lose if our strokes faltered.
Bill, you were one of the first persons I ever met who took art into prisons and thought about deeply about art in other places outside of museums and theaters and those traditional places that we think of art. And you've always been sort of an inspiration to me as I began to work in community arts and going out into these small communities. I always thought about you and the work that you did and that you introduced me to. Tell us about that work.
Well, I appreciate that. First of all, I want to say, Alice, back at you, because I can't tell you what an inspiration your work and your life and your path has been to me. We wake up every day these days, sometimes kind of struggling to get back connected to a story that makes sense and actually has a hopeful future. And you're one of the people whose story helps me wake up every day. So I appreciate that. The prison work is interesting. You know, I think like a lot of people who work in prisons, particularly artists, the first inclination is when, you know, someone does like this, come on over, check it out. The inclination is, oh, no. No, I don't want to do that. And I had to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, Bill, what are you afraid of? And there was a long list of stuff that I was afraid of, most of which I have to say turned out not to be true. But I guess I could say everything I know about the power of art and transformation for communities and people, at least most of it, comes from my time learning at the feet of artists in prison. So we visited the prisons as artists and taught for a long time, you know, over a decade, and it's still happening. But at the end of the day, the community we were visiting, the community we were tapping into, was the artist community inside the prison. And all of those prisoners, Vern and Joe and whatever, it's not like they started making art the minute we walked in. They were creators from the get-go. And they were the teachers at the end of the day. They really were.
Yeah, I totally understand. I remember doing a short residency myself with some women at a halfway house. And it was quite an education. They taught me so much. One of the first things after our first class, I asked them to take their notebooks back to their cells with them and to write during the week. And they all looked at me with this look on their face like I was just an innocent. And they say, no, Miss Lovelace, you take our notebooks with you. And I said, well, why? They said, because if we take them with us, the guards will take them and nothing we say will be safe and our words will be used against us.
Yeah.
So you have to take them with you. And I think that was when I really got the understanding of how special my audience was that I was teaching, but also that I had to be extra careful to protect them, that,
Yes.
that they needed protection as well, and their artistic work needed to be protected. But you went on and you founded the Center for, you founded the Center for the Study of Art and Community. And so you expanded beyond the prison and you brought it back out for us, out into the broader community. You taught us about how art could travel to other places, that it didn't have to be confined. And I think part of that is just what you just said. Artists can be found everywhere. It doesn't mean that even if they're not practicing it, there are all of these silent secret artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have an obligation to them as well. Tell us about the founding of the center and what you do there.
Well, I guess you could say, you know, my university or my practical experience working in prison gave me a sense of two things. One of them was the immense power of the creative process as a transformational force in the world. It reintroduced me to what I think are the sort of foundations of human creativity, which is, no, this isn't some kind of thing that, you know, that we only find in an art gallery or that we find it on a stage in a concert. This thing that human beings do to imagine a future that doesn't exist, to transfer our knowledge and wisdom through stories that translate to other people something that happened or might happen, which is an amazing, amazing thing. That this is happening everywhere, and particularly, and I would just say that my work sort of centers around story. You know, if you think of that at the center, and there isn't a person or a place that isn't just jam-packed with stories, most of which are sort of teeming and bubbling, ready to be shared. And so actually, the extension into the broader world was basically just my own recognition. Oh, just open the doors, right? Be disciplined, be clear, have a sense of responsibility, but those stories are waiting for someone to invite them into the world. And so the center basically does that. Our mission is kind of like a question. You know, how can the creative community help build caring, capable, and equitable communities? And the answer to that question is an everyday endeavor. Absolutely.
Oh, yes. You were a part of so many movements, you know, during the 80s. It was such an incredible time where we were allowed to not only build where we live, but we had these organizations that brought us together nationally and when opportunity to share with people. When you were in California, I was in Georgia, and yet we had this opportunity to meet, to connect, to talk about our work and to theorize about our work. Do you see any of that happening today?
Well, there's the today of today, and there's the today of just yesterday, which is we are definitely in a new chapter that's fairly new, and I think we're all trying on for size. That's one thing. But yes, there's an interesting thing that's happened to the little community that you and I were a part of, this nascent community way back in the day. And that is, I think the logic and the power of the work became obvious and apparent based on your work, my work, many other people's work, to, I guess I would say, the powers that be. When we had our little recession back there in 2008, 2009, 2010, some smart people realized that at least one aspect of arts-based community development, which is what we call it, probably was needed in a kind of, you know, for some people a recession, for some people definitely a depression. And it got a lot of support from folks, foundations, the National Endowment for the Arts or whatever, that kind of saw that it made sense. So the good side about that is more resources came into the community. The other one is with a lot of new people coming into the work, some of them doing it piecemeal, some of it dabbling, some not really knowing what they're doing. The whole question about the moral and ethical dimensions of the work really came to the fore. Because I think some people saw it as kind of an add-on to just whatever, you know, we'll do art education, we're going to work in a prison, you know, we'll have an art exhibit here or there. And in actual fact, my whole life, our work at the center is really about treating it as a very serious profession, arts-based community development, or community arts, or, you know, placemaking, even if you want to call it that, you know, people need to practice and be disciplined about in order to do good work. And one of the things we say is good intentions is not good work.
I'm so excited to hear you say this because it definitely mirrors some of what I've seen in the young artists coming up now. The naivete, I would say, about the work, about how hard it is to do this work, and the ethic and moral issues about entering into a community where you have so much power And you have a responsibility that I was taught, a responsibility to one, understand that it is actually the people who have the power and you actually arrive as a servant. And that servant artist role, I think, is really lost. I think you and I probably come from a generation and we're trained a lot about eschewing being stars. And we wanted to lift up our students and the communities as they were the true stars. And I don't see that today. And I don't see anyone teaching that today. Do you?
Well, so one of the things that I've been privileged to do, ever since then, and actually you and I started out in a course at the Arts Extension Service, right?
Yeah.
And we were in Mississippi. And we did some workshops, et cetera, and then we were up in Massachusetts. Well, I've been doing that work, that training, ever since then. And actually, two places. One in Minneapolis. That course was taught 5 months at a time. So we went for 5 months, if you're in that course, for 16 years. We did that for 16 years. And I've been doing it in St. Louis for the last 22 years. Now, here's an interesting thing, Alice, and I don't know if you know this, but today is the first day that the online version of the course we gave birth to way back in the day is appearing at the Arts Extension Service in Massachusetts.
Really?
Yes.
Y'all, that seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, we're
I'm not surprised that you keep on doing the work and that you kept moving the work forward. I am surprised that you're working in St. Louis, which is my hometown.
Yes, I know that. St. Louis is dear to me, dear to me. The story of St. Louis is one that we all should know for its ugliness and its celebration, because there is a lot of ups and downs in that place, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. Absolutely.
I am encouraged to hear you say that, because when I left, it was because it was definitely one of the worst places, and
Yes.
so I hope you made it a better place in my absence.
Yeah,
But-
one thing to know is that what is called the Community Arts Training Program from the Arts Commission there, it's in its 22nd year, and it has made St. Louis a hotspot. There's over 500 artists and community development folks and organizers and planning department folks who've been through that training program and are now leaders in the community. And so some people call it a cult, which is, I think,
A good thing, though.
it's not a bad thing.
And I see that proves that miracles can happen.
Yes.
To see that kind of movement, and I'm serious. I grew up there, and when you talk about the dark days, St. Louis has a very dark history, a very racist history.
Very, very.
When I left St. Louis and moved to the South, my family couldn't understand, and I told them I didn't think there was any place that could be as racist as St. Louis was, and so I was ready to embrace anything new that might happen,
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
you to bring that change to St. Louis, that speaks volumes. And I know you've not just done that for St. Louis. I know that through the center that you all do this in multiple places around the country. You work with governments, you work with civic organizations, and I'm just really thrilled that there is this continuity, and that
Yeah.
you represent this continuity in our thinking and moving it forward and raising up a new generation. So you talk about art-centered learning and it necessary for the development of every child, and I really, really love that, because children were one of my particular audiences that I always gravitated towards. 35 years of teaching in schools all over the country with students, young students were always mine. Tell me about that work you're doing to help people understand how integral the arts are for children.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Any person who has been around a child who is young and developing, if they just open their eyes, there's this living, breathing, heat-seeking, creative force of nature that's crawling and bumping and learning a new language and figuring out how to manipulate adults as soon as possible using the creative process, making up stories, inventing creatures, listening to stories. I mean, that's their MO, right? It's like they come as they grow older and they get ready for school. It's like they're baked, ready for a creative encounter, ready for an arts-infused learning experience. And as you well know, that isn't necessarily available to all kids. And I don't see it as a curricular issue. See it as a moral and ethical issue, which is these young brains, they've already done a significant part of the learning that they're going to do using the creative process, learning a language, learning how to operate in the world, right? Touching, feeling, experimenting, in the laboratory of the world. Okay, let's let them own the space of the classroom in a way that is comfortable to them using those same processes. Learning how to read, learning math, learning all those important things. But, hey, I can do the multiplication tables while I'm dancing. There's a rhythm there, right?
Yeah.
And so this is more than just sort of a curricular nice thing. This is, to me, at the core of meeting children where they're coming from and giving them a chance to be the most vibrant, creative, exploratory learning entities. That's what they're born for.
Yes, totally agree. And it is during this particular time, we're speaking now during the pandemic when schools have been closed down, when children have been relegated to school on the same medium we're using, doing it electronically. Artists are not there. It's a challenging time, I think, particularly for the young people. And it has been intriguing to me that these systems have not figured out to do what you just said. It's to create some room in that online curriculum where the children are in control, where they can explore their creativity, because it can be done online. It doesn't mean that they find some joy. And it's after 30, 40 minutes of that joy of creating, you come back to learning with a fresh mind, with a fresh perspective, and with a new energy. And I fail to understand why adults, after all these years, still don't grasp how integral arts are for children and their learning. And not just to learn art, but all their learning.
Here's an example. Hey, who are you? Well, I'm your friend, right here online. Well, what do you want? Well, I just want to be here and I want to talk to Alice. One of the things I've been doing with this online it's a challenging environment. But that's one of the first things I did was I said, okay, even teaching adults, I said, hey, we got a big issue we got to talk about here. An issue. How do we have a safe community when the people who are supposed to be protecting us actually end up being dangerous, right? Okay. Well, different people have different ideas about that. Why don't you have a conversation between this sock puppet and this sock puppet and duke it out, right? As a way of, rather than getting on one side of the question or the other side of the question, actually understand that in order to solve this, these two sock puppets have to figure out some place in between, right?
Maybe we can introduce that to our politicians too.
Yes.
That's not moving forward.
Absolutely.
So what are you working on these days?
Well, actually, and this is something that you're going to participate in tomorrow. We wake up every day and it can be a struggle, as I said before, to see the world with a sense of hope. But the thing that's really filling me with hope is my ongoing everyday conversations with people like you for the podcast that I've been producing. And we're fairly early days. We have about 20 episodes in. And they're basically people from around the world who are rolling up their sleeves and doing incredible work. And the great thing about the podcast is that it's really just a place to invite people to tell stories about the power of their work. So, I mean, people sometimes talk in bullet points, but at the end of the day, just say, tell me the story of how that happened. Was it raining? Did the people clap? Did they walk out? Those kinds of stories bring the work home, and it just fills me with a sense of incredible optimism about what human beings are potentially capable of. Another thing I've been doing, which is that little movie that you played at the beginning. And at the end of the movie, it said, this came from the Story Center, which is a place here in Oakland. And it basically gives people access to the incredible power of digital storytelling. And so I've been working with them. And so in addition to being a songwriter and an author, I'm now a little filmmaker, which is, it's really fun, to learn something new. You were mentioning before some of the sort of impatience that some young people have about, artistry in the world, and maybe not slowing down or reflecting on the immense responsibility of that. And I kind of realized that whether I like it or not, I'm now the old white geezer, who's going to tell stories about the old days, right? And remind people of something that I might think of as wisdom, and they might think of as just a lot of hot air. But that is the role we play, Griot.
It is, and it is a great responsibility in that role, being community-based artists and being artists who recognize that the true power they possess is the power to connect with others. And the more of us that come into this together, the more powerful we will be as a movement. So what are we going to do now that we're in 2021 and we might come out of a pandemic and we have a new president? We've had a resurrection at the White House, and what's our way forward? And how do artists lead us forward?
Well, one of the things that, and I can just say this personally, I took for granted most of my life that I knew how to engage people and be with them and listen well and learn from them and celebrate with them and break bread with them. And I'm realizing that because we took it for granted and we did these things every day, when you stop doing that, right? Or you do it in a way that is really rather distorted, you have to practice again. And of all the things that I know that artists do, that the human creative process allows us to do, it is that most basic human thing, which is to engage each other, hear and feel each other, listen to our stories, and kind of reintroduce the thing that basically is the difference between our survival and our not surviving, which is to cooperate. Art making is, at the end of the day, it is collective story making in service to our ability to work together to common purpose. And we're going to have to roll up our sleeves, all of us, and engage the community in ways that exercise those muscles, and in very practical ways. How do we come to a place and listen to music together? How do we listen to each other's stories? One other thing is just, some people go, oh God, I'm having kind of writers, COVID writer's block, right, or whatever. And I'm just saying, I'm sorry. There is a giant tsunami of stories that are accumulating right now as a result of this extraordinary thing that is happening in the world. Some of them are tragic, some of them are celebratory, some of them are deeply, deeply, deeply spiritual. And it's going to be artists' jobs, everybody's job, is to nurture those stories and bring them forth in a way that they're respected and they bring the wisdom in the world that this moment has engendered.
I think that's what's so powerful about this new podcast that you're doing. And the fact that you're not just talking to U.S. artists, but you actually are talking to artists around the world. And in a way, breaking down that those global barriers between us, understanding that our work is the same no matter where we find ourselves. And that even if we don't know each other and each other's practices, we tend to build on the same practices.
Yes.
Because, like you said, I mean, we know the base of everyone's life is a story. And the most powerful thing you can say to a person when you meet them is, tell me your story.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what would you like to tell us before we go on?
So I know you have an incredible audience, an incredible community of people who, no doubt, tune in to sit at the feet of Alice Lovelace, the wise person.
First, yes, you should know that. When I asked you to do this, I said, "Oh, the first person I have to talk to is Bill Cleveland."
Yeah. So that's number one. Is I would just say keep listening to Alice and her friends. The other one is it may be hard, and and I think we all are encountering new kinds of fatigue. But one of the antidotes to this moment is to create, even if it's a struggle. Take a piece of paper out and a pencil and write. If you have a child young enough to still want to listen to your voice, sing a lullaby, make up a lullaby, and when you come together with people, even though you may be shy or whatever, one of the things that I did in one of the more recent versions, actually the current episode of our podcast, Change the Story, Change the World, starts with asking people to sing with me on the podcast. And you're not going to be surprised, but the lyrics are, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." So that's, we owe ourselves opportunities. It's an elixir, I think, creating that we give short shrift sometimes. So go for it. It's worth at least 2 cups of coffee, if not more.
I totally agree. Well, I know that California is lucky to have you. Are you going to be doing any traveling? Are you going to be consulting at any other places coming up?
As you well know, the world is shut down. And right now, I don't even think I want to be in an airplane. But I will tell you. So just this morning, I did an interview with some folks in Singapore. And, we started to make plans like, sometime, in the next universe, we'll come together again, right? And Sue Lin, who is her name, she said, no. Let's just meet up again on Zoom as soon as possible. So as deficient as it is, this is a means of transportation. So
It is.
I think we all need to avail ourselves of it in lieu of the time when we get to come together and break bread and give each other a hug.
So I'm curious. I know you mentioned it, but can you talk about how that class happened to come up at UMass and be recycled online?
Interesting. Having worked for decades since Arts Extension Service, and you and I, so that's 3 decades. We've been trying to basically extend this idea of an education in this work, right? And to be rigorous about it, and to actually call the question, the question that you actually asked at the very first class that we had, which is, are you willing to be changed? And that's really at the core of our curriculum. But at every turn, the whole idea of bringing people together for 5 months in a circle to learn, it's heavy lifting, and it is also expensive comparatively. And so I've always been trying to figure out what is a way to get this to more people, right? Because there's so many artists, young artists in particular, who are hungry to tap into all the stories that other artists who have gone down this path have to offer. And so I went back and forth with Arts Extension Service, because that's what they do. They do online, arts administration, arts training, those kinds of things. And I just said, let's do it, let's do it. And they said, boy, you have no idea how this is the perfect moment for it. Because as the university is actually starting to wake up to the idea that there's a world outside of the gates of, of the university, and they need to engage it. So we're off and running. We're off and running.
So how can people become a part of that?
Okay. So this is our maiden voyage, and which, as I said, starts today. So that, registration for that course is probably done, but it's going to happen again.
Okay.
And so the way to tap into it is to go to the Arts Extension Service website, which you can just do a Google search, and they have a link there that says courses. And I think you can communicate directly to them so that you can end up with them telling, letting you know when the next course is going to happen. And I actually, Alice, I promise that when the next course is scheduled, I will send you the information too, so you can pass it on to your listeners.
I was going to ask you for that, and we definitely will post it on our website and on our Facebook page, and encourage. I'm so happy to know that this opportunity is available, and we'll let people know that this is an opportunity they can take advantage of. Also, definitely will be posting information about the Center for the Study of Art and Community, and about your podcast, and encouraging folks to support it. And that's what this is all about, is how do we lift each other up across this country now that we can no longer gather together to lift each other's spirits and encourage each other. What can we do in this new age to continue building our community and educating our community? I'm like you, on that older age. I've retired a couple of times, but retirement doesn't quite sit well, so I get back into the work. But there is a lot to be done, and I'm so grateful, Bill, for the opportunity that we had to meet all those years ago, and the things that kept us together in those days. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you in this day. And
absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you for inviting me. I am honored. It's a privilege to be on your show, and it's really a privilege to have known you. Absolutely.
To know me, I'm not gone yet. And the same to you. Privileged to know you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our guest today has been Bill Cleveland, who is the director of the Center for the Study of Art and Community, located in Alameda, California. I encourage you to check out their website, to check out the work that they're doing there, and to come back and visit us again on the ArtsXchange Art Shouts. Thank you.